Truly I say to you, unless you turn, you might say, are converted, and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. This spiritual childhood has been picked up, of course, by Saint Therese of Lisieux, but there is more to it than meets the eye. Spiritual childhood has an element of humility because it is based on the dynamic of reception. A child receives. A child does not teach, he is taught. There is a link between docility, which comes from the Latin doceo, and silence. A person who tendentially is teaching others in a conversation is not being taught. Hence, the saints, all the authors who have written on the issue, all concur that a certain interiority is by nature linked to a certain tendency to silence. John of the Cross, very clearly in his maxims, does actually quite clearly say that the tendency to be a great talker is incompatible with the interior life. So this mode of going through life teaching others is not a good way to engage with our God, who cannot teach us. All the time that we are emitting, we are blocking. And it has also a corollary. We are heavy to bear. Humility does attract. Pride, or its correlated disease of invasiveness and attention-seeking, is what we call that of a bore, and they are difficult people to abide. Therefore, a certain delicacy towards others includes this element of noticing when we are no longer interesting, hearing ourselves. Many go through life without being able to do that. Now, the Lord goes on in this passage to indicate the importance of a child as such. And he comes to this unexpected end. See that you do not despise one of these little ones, for I tell you that in heaven their angels always behold the face of my Father who is in heaven. A passage which is read in the Feast of the Guardian Angels on the 2nd of October. And it is something which, if we think about it profoundly, tells us much about the invisible world. Our guardian angels are real beings and friends, and they can also communicate with each other. One time in Italy, I was listening to a man who had come on retreat, and for some reason he came out with this story, that he, in one situation, had absolutely to get in contact with his son, and there was no way of doing so. I forget the reasons, but it was just impossible. There was perhaps no mobile link at that time. It doesn't really matter, but the point was it was genuinely urgent, and he had this inspiration to communicate through the guardian angels, and it actually worked. The guardian angels sometimes are around us and, as it were in human terms, are feeling frustrated because they're not thought about and they are left, as it were, unemployed. They are only too ready to come in and to answer a prayer. It is therefore a devotion to be cultivated. It also has a secondary effect, that we become so aware of that angelic presence and shield and regard that we think twice about letting words come out of our mouth, or a certain comportment out of our body, or even a general boisterousness which is incompatible with being surrounded by an angelic presence. That should be the case also, and perhaps even more, whenever we come to the double presence in a chapel, where we have the Lord and his court of angels. And of course our guardian angel knows that and sees it, we can't, but he's delighted when he finds his mates, because they're in good company. The guardian angel can never be lost, but he can be saddened. And at the end of our life, we do see, it appears, our guardian angel, usually for the first time. The question is, what happens when a soul doesn't make it? And the guardian has fought in vain the satellites of hell, and has, not that he is lost, but he has not had the collaboration of his ward, and he has not made the effort necessary to collaborate with what he was trying his best to get him to get. And many people are their own worst enemies, and the soul therefore, for its own responsibility, it can't be avoided, is lost. What must be the sadness of that guardian angel who sees going into the pit of hell the one that he was appointed to protect? There we are, he's in the divine will, and sadness is not as we see it. Justice is also something that gives glory to the God of justice and mercy, and in St. Faustina those two poles are inseparable. It is a misunderstood devotion to divine mercy to create a false God, all of sugar and candy. Mercy has no sense if justice is not an issue. If we take it without the other, we are creating rights that we do not have. I deserve glory, and I will get it because God can't do me any harm. We do ourselves harm, and unfortunately we don't realize the consequences. There is a third element to look at, and it's this. If we are surrounded by an angelic presence and invited ourselves to live in such a mode that there is a continuity between this life and the next, so that we calmly go from time to eternity in one straight line, then we do think twice about doing things which will impede that. It is very important that we do not, at any point of our existence, allow ourselves to do or allow ourselves to be in a presence that is outside what we will be willing to own up to before our guardian angel. So that is important when it comes to the people that we are with. We can, if we want to really wriggle out of a situation where God is being grievously offended, we have to obey the divine will in his providence when he wants us to be in a certain place because of our state in life, but we don't have to collaborate and engage with all. A delicate issue is the borderline one of somebody who, because of his state of life, is exposed, e.g., to unpleasant noise waves, music and bad words, which are part and parcel of many forms of employment in our day, pumped at us through the machines of emission of noise. Noise pollution would be a better expression, because we are no longer allowed to be with our angels and our thoughts. We are engaged with demons in the air, because these things emitting vaporous fumes of bad words and blasphemy, if one listens carefully to the lyrics and whatnot, are an offence continuously to the Divine Majesty. So there is a borderline case there. What does one do? To conclude, the presence that we have is actually a presence that the angels admire and in a sense envy. They cannot receive Holy Communion, they certainly cannot consecrate, and when in the case of miracles of receiving Holy Communion from an angel happen, they always happen through the angel having to go into a tabernacle. We know that. It has been asked by one or two in that experience, where did he get the hosts? From the tabernacle. Therefore it is always the priest. But whether it is a priest or a layperson, we are involved in something that the angels cannot have. We also have something that the angels cannot have, and that is suffering. We can merit in a way that they cannot. Therefore, while we are on earth, we can grow and we can merit and help others, pulling the weaker ones after us by sanctifying pain, interior or outer. Let us then, in that atmosphere of fear and trembling, come now into the presence of our God, and aware that as we do so, we are surrounded with a whole invisible throng. We ask for the grace to be worthy of that throng, not only in the chapel, but in every moment of our existence. There is a place where peace and mercy meet, where humankind the rays of Godhead can in darkness greet, and healing find. There is a manhood where divinity looks at us from all eternity. A stream of light, a beam of ancient grace, dimmed in this hour, for us who in this tender face behold the power that uttered a time that bend the moments be. I see this gaze that waited long for me. O Master, draw me close to this soft heat that melts in